Thank you. And it's my job, again, to very briefly give an introduction to Laurie, who is then going to be introducing our first keynote address. Before that, though, I just wanted to reiterate what Anna said, and personally thank Anna also for all her work. This has been a gigantic effort to get all this together. And I also want to recognize Debbie Stein and Joe Heiser, who also are associate directors at the Scott Institute, and their work is scattered throughout, and especially on Friday, Debbie's big show is the Allegheny Clean Tech Competition, which we're extremely excited about. Innovation is in the title of the Scott Institute, and this is a showcase for innovation both regionally and within the university. And so it's, again, my distinct pleasure to not have to have done most of what you're seeing here. So I'm just, it's great to show up and be part of this, but a lot of credit goes to the staff of the Scott Institute, who are, to a person, incredibly competent and great people. So one last thanks to them, and then we'll hand over. So Laurie Weingart is the moderator of this coming panel. She's responsible for leading, she's the interim provost for CMU, and she's responsible for leading all the schools, colleges, and institutes, and academic planning and implementation also. She's a nationally and internationally recognized scholar on group processes and social motives and tactical behavior that affect negotiation. Later this evening, she'll also be the moderator for the Distinguished Mayors Forum with Mayor Carmen Cruz from Puerto Rico and Mayor Bill Peduto from Pittsburgh. And it'll be fantastic to see how all that goes. And so I hope that you stick around for not only this session right now, but come back tonight to hear that amazing interaction. So without further ado, Laurie.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Energy Week keynote at Carnegie Mellon. We're featuring our very special guest, Anne Pramaggiore. We're very happy you could join us for this third annual CMU Energy Week. As you know, it's organized by Carnegie Mellon's Wilton E. Scott Institute. This Energy Week 2018 brings to campus thought leaders, as you know, from industry, government, academia, the nonprofit sector, to engage and collaborate on energy research, trends, innovative technologies, and opportunities. Now I'd like to share a little bit with you about our very special speaker today. Anne Pramaggiore is one of the nation's top corporate executives in energy and utilities, and a sterling example of what women can achieve in corporate leadership. As president and CEO of ComEd, one of the most influential electric utilities in the state of Illinois, Anne oversees the delivery of electricity to 3.8 million customers in Chicago and Northern Illinois. And as a native Chicagoan myself, I'm especially interested to hear what she has to say. The next time the power goes out for my family back home, I'll know who to call. Okay, seriously, Anne joined ComEd as the lead lawyer and head of regulatory policy in the late 1990s, working on the company's transition to competitive energy markets. She rose to become COO in 2009, overseeing the day-to-day operations of the electric grid and customer operations. In 2012, ComEd made her the first woman to hold the post of president and CEO. Under her leadership, earlier this year, ComEd became one of the first utilities in the nation approved to build a microgrid cluster. With that kind of impact, it's no wonder that she serves on the board of directors for the Chicago Federal Reserve, Motorola Solutions, Babcock & Wilcox Enterprises, and several civic and community organizations. Notably, Anne took a very non-traditional path to corporate energy success. She studied communications and theater at Miami University of Ohio before earning a law degree at DePaul University and transitioning into the energy sector. It does make me wonder if she has a little Carnegie Mellon DNA in her. As we say, that's so CMU. Anne is a perfect example of what we are about here at Carnegie Mellon. Cross-disciplinary research and education that produces outstanding and innovative results. And we're very pleased to have you with us here to address us today, so please join me in welcoming Anne Pramaggiore.
Thank you, Laurie. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it. And you can call me, or your family can call me with an outage anytime. We learn to live with that as utility executives. We're pretty much 24/7, and we take all phone calls. Interestingly, recently, a phone call that we took was from Puerto Rico. And you're having the mayor of San Juan here, and I think that's very exciting. We actually have crews down in Puerto Rico now. We've been down there for several months doing work, and I can say that's been some of the most impactful work that I think our company has done to be able to go down there and provide relief to those people who have been without power for months and months and months. So a great experience, and I just share that on the note of collaboration and the way our industry works together. David Owen is here, and part of EEI, the Association of Utilities, investor-owned utilities across the country. And this is what we do. When there's a big event, a big disaster, we come together and support each other. And so I thought I'd mention that, but I will also talk a lot about collaboration and working together and how we get this energy transformation done. But I'm delighted to be here at Carnegie Mellon and in the city of Pittsburgh. Both the institution and the city are renowned for invention, and perhaps more importantly, for their partnership in the city's reinvention. Invention is hard, reinvention is harder. Invention takes intelligence, vision, and drive. Reinvention takes all that and more. With reinvention, you don't have the luxury of starting from a blank whiteboard. You're required to build on top of and around infrastructure that already exists. You're required to address economic interests and renegotiate social expectations long and deeply embedded in an existing system. It's making sure that you don't tug on the thread that unravels the existing system before you've built the new one. So Pittsburgh figured out this delicate weave. Pittsburgh created a viable vision for the future based on a clear understanding of its past. In fact, it reformed its original construction as Steel City and built a new economy leveraging its past industrial leadership, from Smoky City to Roboburg, a technology-based city poised for the future. And that evolution made a lot of sense because it stayed true to the area's core strength. As one observer put it, Pittsburgh is a place where stuff gets made. In building its new economy, Pittsburgh defined a mission to create a sustainable, engaging city with a commitment to 100% renewable energy. And Pittsburgh had resources. In addition to its technical past, it had a group of civic, governmental, academic, and business partners who came together because they recognized that the mission couldn't be achieved unless all interests connected. This reinvention didn't happen by chance. Like every good revolution, it had a vision, a mission, the technology and resources to execute on the vision, and a recognition by stakeholders with local knowledge and a systems perspective that every piece you touch, physical, economic, social, is interconnected to every other piece in a delicately balanced weave. The recipe worked. The region has seen its population grow by 40% since 2000. The innovation economy with Carnegie Mellon at the epicenter is booming. The quality of life is saturated with culture and low-cost living, and the city has become a destination. A few years ago, the president of Pittsburgh's Downtown Partnership provided a great validation of the city's rebound. He said, "In the city, we are starting to see strollers." So in energy, we are also in the midst of reinvention. Frankly, I prefer calling it a revolution. It's personal to me. I was a kid in the 1960s and found all the talk of social change and revolution intoxicating. By the time I had really grown up and could be active in anything, I found myself in the 1980s, out of denim bell-bottoms and wearing white polyester pants. We somehow had moved from civil rights and spiritual enlightenment at Woodstock to dirty dancing at Saturday Night Live discos, from Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin to Wham and the biggest fraud perpetrated in pop music, Milli Vanilli. I have never gotten over it. So I'm claiming my revolution here, right now, in the transformation of the energy sector. And you all know it's a revolution. You see it, you feel it, you're part of it. It's the second electric revolution being designed to support the developed world's third industrial revolution. And the revolution has all the ingredients of Pittsburgh's reinvention. There's a vision, which is to build an energy system of 6 attributes: cleaner, leaner, smarter, more reliable, more resilient, and more custom. There's a mission to create a system to serve a digital economy and to make the benefits broadly accessible to all people. There is increasingly the tools and technology to make it happen, and there can be no question that redesigning the most complex network machine in the world and unraveling an economic structure embedded in laws developed over 100 years requires an alliance of stakeholders, all of whom understand that every piece we touch is interconnected. So I want to spend my minutes with you today talking about what the roadmap for this revolution should look like and how we're executing on the roadmap at ComEd. But before we talk about where we're going, it's important to talk about where we came from, and Pittsburgh understood this. Just like Pittsburgh, we're not writing on a blank whiteboard. We're constructing on top of existing infrastructure, physical, economic, and social. I come from Chicago and its utility, Commonwealth Edison, and I'm not writing on a blank whiteboard either. In fact, at the turn of the last century, Chicago and Commonwealth Edison were the epicenter of the emerging electric industry. Chicago is where Thomas Edison sent his top lieutenant, Sam Insull, to find a way to sell his light bulbs on a massive scale. But Insull did far more than that. He made my hometown the birthplace of the industry's business and operating model. He invented a whole new approach to generate, distribute, and finance electric power. Insull centralized power generation and distribution, rolling up decentralized power providers and systems into one entity that could produce electricity at mass scale. As Edison said of building the early grid, it was necessary to invent everything: dynamos, regulators, meters, switches, fuses, fixtures, and a host of other parts. Insull wove all these parts together with investments in the physical grid, tied to a complete set of economic and regulatory layers, all creating a social compact full of expectations for what became an essential service to our economy and quality of life. Eventually, Insull's model overwhelmed and overhauled this industry. In 2000, the U.S. National Academy of Engineering declared the creation of a national electric grid the greatest engineering achievement of the 20th century. It was the greatest because it made most every other innovation possible, either because electricity is used to make it or electricity is needed to run it. The Edison-Insull model is remarkable for its massive impact on the physical, economic, and social aspects of 20th century American life. But ironically, Insull's model is most notable because it sowed the seeds of its own demise. The 20th century relic is the gateway to the 21st century economy. Today, our electric system has enabled the emergence of the third industrial revolution, where everything is digital. Billions of people and countless devices can communicate across borders and oceans. Where mobile computing is how we live, automation is part of our economic DNA, and artificial intelligence is no longer a futuristic dream. And in this world, it seems everything is electric, from the ubiquitous e-commerce technology that undergirds our economy, to the robots of Pittsburgh, to the tools of our healthcare system, to the future of transportation. And perhaps in its most unexpected twist, the new economic revolution, the model this enabled, is calling for an energy system that is more distributed, more competitive, more akin to the one Insull redesigned 100 years ago. We are going back to the future. So the first electric revolution sowed the seeds for what we now know as the digital electric world, but the fertilizer for its growth emerged in 1962. Yeah, 1962. Why 1962? I don't know. How do I know that it was in 1962? I don't even know why I came across this, but 1962 was the year, with the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, launching the environmental movement and creating a mission for our future system. In 1962, we saw the invention of the light-emitting diode, initiating energy efficiency technology, reflecting an industry's shift in perspective around enabling technology, and the introduction by a group of prescient animators of a futuristic family illuminating an electric world and providing a vision for the future. Excuse me. Had I known, I could have helped. Thank you.
The 21st century, transportation, space travel, robotics, teleconferencing,
Right there.
and supersonic sports.
(1962), the Jetsons. The vision of the Jetsons world is no fantasy. The mission of sustainability will not be denied, and the technology tsunami started by LEDs is only gaining force. This future world is no fraud, it is no Milli Vanilli, it is here. And at ComEd, we take quite seriously this vision of a future electric world. Not surprisingly, we believe, as did Pittsburgh, that not only can this new world be built on the existing system, we believe the existing system makes the new electric world possible. No one disputes the energy system of the 21st century must look very different from its predecessor, but some suggest that the grid itself is obsolete, imagining a totally disconnected and distributed system. To this chorus of the disconnected, I'd simply paraphrase Mark Twain. Reports of the grid's death are greatly exaggerated. In a world where every household can be its own personal power plant, where there are more electric vehicles on the road, where power is coming from and to many different places, the grid becomes more important, not less. And the reason is simple. It's the power of networks. According to UC Berkeley professor Carl Shapiro, there is a central difference between the old and new economies. The old industrial economy was driven by economies of scale. The new information economy is driven by the economics of networks. The internet and wireless networks are, of course, the most visible symbols of our economic era. But at its most basic level, the electric grid is just one big network, too, connecting people, homes, businesses, schools, hospitals, and virtually anyone or anything that requires power, which in our modern economy means basically everyone and everything. Put another way, a single home with its own rooftop solar array and a basement battery is a powerful idea, but becomes far more powerful if that setup is part of a network that does what networks do: enhance choice, generate efficiencies, and create opportunity. So at ComEd, we're approaching the future in a way that both honors the past successes of the electric grid and allows for new uses customers will make of it. We're designing a platform that enables us to offer the strength and stability of the interconnected network and the innovation and choice that independent markets so effectively offer. Like Pittsburgh's reinvention roadmap, we're focused on the physical, economic, and social threads of our reinvention. Our first area of focus is building a physical infrastructure that incorporates the 6 attributes I mentioned earlier: clean, lean, smart, reliable, resilient, and custom. And the service imperative of broad accessibility. In Illinois, we've just completed a 6-year modernization program adding smart meters, smart switches, smart sensors, smart substations, all of which have combined to improve reliability by 50% and save our customers billions of dollars. Check reliability. We recognize that 20th century reliability has a 21st century cousin: resilience. Driven by the need to withstand challenges of a changing climate and security environment, ComEd is addressing this requirement with more underground infrastructure, more modularity in design, and through new experimental technology like superconducting cable, which will allow us to connect multiple substations in the Chicago Business District and lean on the excess capacity in one substation in a way not currently possible in the event another substation experiences a problem. Check resiliency. We address lean through our 5-year voltage optimization program, through which we'll fit half of our 5,000 feeders with technology that allows us to control voltage more tightly and reduce system-wide energy usage in the range we expect about 2%. Check lean. And our Solar for All program, set out in Illinois' Future Energy Jobs Act, creates a path for 3,000 megawatts of solar, predominantly community scale, moving toward clean and assuring the broadest access possible. And on the attribute of custom, we're working on pricing and services tailored toward individuals or individual customers. But our initial foray is focused on information, with pilots like personal reliability reports and data services like this. I'm going to get some help again. Thank you.
Hey, did you remember to vacuum and clean the living room yesterday like I asked?
Couldn't vacuum yesterday. There was a power outage. I couldn't vacuum.
Alexa, ask ComEd when was our last outage?
Your last outage was over a year ago. Would you like me to give you the details?
Thank you. Check custom. Those are actually our employees, and Laurie, next time your folks need information on their outages, we're sending them to Alexa or Echo.
Another video started playing. I'm sorry.
We don't do rockets. That would not be mine. So that's the work on the physical network. We also have work to do to upgrade the economic system. And until very recently, the focus of our business had been on pushing power through a linear pipeline of mass production and distribution, all controlled by a single entity. The vertically integrated pipeline business, however, is a relic of the 20th century. That's not how the economy functions anymore. Not in the era of the smartphone and the internet, the age of eBay, Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, and more, each of them platforms, networks, that provide the architecture for people to interact, move, rent, buy, sell, and work. Simply put, platforms are the dominant business model of our time. And if you're an existing company and you want to survive, you can't keep singing the same old tune. You have to compose a whole new score. But the electric industry, a network industry, is well suited to a platform economic model. And if we get the digital melodies and technological harmonies down right, our evolving electric grid has the potential to become one of the most important platforms in the economy. So we're exploring accomplishing this through a 4-layer model that begins with the infrastructure of today, the physical system, and builds an operating and planning function 1 layer up. Still very much traditional utility. Layer 3 is focused on energy transactions, starting to get away from traditional utility, topped off by a 4th layer featuring services like energy efficiency, demand management, and solar services. Utilities will need to fulfill the same core responsibility, delivering affordable, reliable power when and where it's needed. But now we're inviting a multitude of actors, sellers and buyers of energy, services, and information to interact on the grid as well. It blends the stability of the old world with the choice and agility of the digital age. Now, our engineers love adding new technology to the grid. And working through fascinating economic models like the platform fuels the enthusiasm of our very smart economists and financial minds. But as it was in Pittsburgh reinvention, the system must, at the end of the day, work for people. So we're hard at work exploring the social implications of all this change in parallel with the physical and economic questions. In designing the energy system of the future, there will be no one-size-fits-all solution like we've had in the past. The technology, economics, and consumer expectations are driving to smaller solutions within the larger network, like community generation and microgrids. On Chicago's south side, in the Bronzeville neighborhood, we're beginning to build a community microgrid. We're designing what may be the nation's first small network of microgrids as we connect the ComEd microgrid to an existing microgrid at Illinois Tech, or the Illinois Institute of Technology, as it was formerly known, and integrate control technology that will allow for dispatch across the two microgrids and sharing and optimizing resources in the event of outages. These microgrids play a unique technical role in developing grid resilience, but will also explore the power of people, community, and connection. Our Bronzeville project will allow us to experiment with the social aspect of electric infrastructure as never before. We will be testing the concept of an electric ecosystem of technology-driven services to support a community by adding concepts like smart streetlights, demonstrating electric vehicle ride-sharing as a community mobility solution, installing wind, solar, and battery-powered outdoor lighting units to create safer spaces, and establishing community information kiosks. But perhaps the most important test is the connection we make with customers and the connection community members can make to one another. So we will also be testing community connection concepts through a sharing economy program, where we will afford customers participating in our energy efficiency programs the ability to use their savings to reduce their bill, as they do today, or to donate the savings to a school or church or a community organization. And the social crown jewel is the experimental trading platform we have in the design phase. To incent energy efficiency investment, we are developing an attribute, a tradable attribute around a kilowatt hour reduction. We hope to design a trading platform via smart contracts. Now, I'm not an engineer by training, but I am a geek at heart, so I get really excited about the technical aspects of microgrids. But here's why I think they're truly special. They meet us where we are. They're a solution for how more and more of us live in 2017 and 2018. The most exciting innovations are often happening at the neighborhood level, and microgrids allow us to meet the unique needs of each neighborhood and draw on the unique strengths of local communities while taking advantage of the overall interconnectedness of the grid. So I've thrown a lot at you this morning: reinvention roadmaps, platform models, network economics, microgrids, milli vanilli. So what's the takeaway? Even as utilities help lead the effort to reinvent our energy system, we must do so under much tougher conditions than many other innovators. We can't simply focus on the exciting technical aspects alone or any other single aspects of transformation without minding the broad system effects. Some of you may be familiar with a book that came out a year or so ago that aptly describes how Silicon Valley approaches innovation. It's called Move Fast and Break Things. The idea that it's desirable to radically disrupt the existing order in pursuit of something better. And that's really exciting stuff. But we don't have the luxury of taking that approach in this industry. We can't afford to have our electric grid break down today on our way to a more promising tomorrow. We are 9% of the US economy, and the other 91% relies on us. So we have to run a business that supports and enables the activities of all others. The phrase I use to remind my team of their obligation to look at all the implications of the transformational steps we take and to be mindful of which thread you're tugging on is technology leads, but policy rules. While we often think of regulation and policy as a hurdle, and it is, it also embodies the interconnected network of economic and social expectations. And so we have to be mindful of that. And this is where you come in. My message isn't simply that we need to understand the system we're dismantling, although we do. And it isn't simply that we need to create the correct new policies, though we do. It's also that we need everyone at the table. This is once again where Pittsburgh got it right, where the city's vision, mission, and technology converged to bring this 20th century economic powerhouse into the 21st century through a group of critical stakeholders, of which Carnegie Mellon was first among equals. It is also where Carnegie Mellon is getting it right, bringing together different schools, engineering, policy, and business, to soak on this big question of energy transformation. Now, we must take the same approach in reinventing and revolutionizing the energy system across the United States. So I'm honored to be working with all of you in forging the second electric revolution. It's important, it's exciting, and I can't wait to see what comes next. Thank you very much for your time.
We have questions that are coming in. So on your tables, we dropped a note again about our app, which is slido.com. So we have a couple of questions that have come in. And so I have them here on my iPad, technology at work. So if you don't mind, and
Sure.
Thank you again for a wonderful presentation.
Thanks, glad to be here.
The first question comes in from Johanna, and she wants to know, what do you see as the regulatory hurdles to achieve your vision, particularly with microgrids?
Yeah, well, there's many, many regulatory hurdles out there. So one of the challenges that we have is being innovative and taking innovative steps when the current regulatory model, really, and the law really sort of constrains what you can invest in as an electric utility. So for instance, the microgrid isn't precisely within the four corners of the law in terms of what we're permitted to do. There's some questions about generation ownership. There's some questions. We have battery storage in there. What is the role of battery storage? Is it generation? Is it distribution? Can the utility own it? We're a restructured state, so the question of generation ownership is always there. So it's, probably a $25 million project at the end of the day. And the question is, are you willing to place that bet without knowing that you'll actually recover those costs when you go into the regulatory agency with your rate case? Or do you want to sort of carve a regulatory path to get some sort of pre-approval that will very much slow you down? So this microgrid we've been working on for about 3 years. We made an attempt to set up legislation that would allow us to build microgrids. That didn't work, so we went to the regulator and we actually got approval for this just in February. So, one of the hurdles is, how do utilities engage in innovative and experimental projects when the law is not designed to accommodate that, and you're always doing that at risk? And I think, we understand that we're pushing the envelope and there's a certain amount of risk that we're willing to take, but many of these projects are going to be quite expensive. We just have a very expensive business. The infrastructure is not cheap, and so how much risk are you willing to take is always a question. And so that's one of the ways we've tried to solve it. One of the things we were able to do about a year ago at the legislature was we took energy efficiency, and rather than, it traditionally has been a pass-through. Basically, if we spend $1 on energy efficiency, we recover $1. So it's just a pass-through. We turned it into an earnings opportunity, which creates incentives in the utility, in our business. It becomes a part of our business, so we're incented to want to do that. The other thing we did with energy efficiency to change it is we created an R&D bucket around energy efficiency. Now it's limited toward energy efficiency, but it is a bucket of dollars that we have every year to spend in innovation space, but it's specifically carved out in legislation.
The next question we have is, how do you attract different industries to create a unified vision for collaboration and policy innovation? What is a shared motivator?
Well, I think the shared motivator, first of all, it's not easy work, and it's some of the hardest work, and I commend Carnegie Mellon for what they're doing in terms of bringing multiple disciplines within the school together to focus on this. And honestly, the Pittsburgh story is phenomenal. That doesn't happen every day. To bring various stakeholders together, create a common vision, create a roadmap, accomplish the mission and really drive something forward in that way. I think so it's hard to do. It takes a lot of work. It takes building trust over many years amongst different people. But I think there has to be a shared vision of the future, and it's a shared vision that creates broad benefits, and that's how you bring people in, is that they see benefits. We're putting together a collaboration right now around smart cities in Chicago, and there's academic institutions, there's Argonne National Labs has developed a really, a neat kind of sensor that you can put out. It works on the system, but it also has environmental sensing aspects to it. So we've got Argonne in the mix. There are the MacArthur Foundation is in the mix, and their focus is very much around the human aspects of what technology brings. So I think you bring people together with a shared vision that there are broad benefits. And when I look at energy transformation, I mean, there is nothing I think you can spend your time on this day, today in this current world that can have broader impacts than energy transformation. When you think about environmental, social, economic, this is a business, a system that touches every aspect of our lives, quality of life, and to work on that and ensure that the transformation creates the broadest benefits, I think is really exciting.
So the next question is ComEd doing anything to work with small and medium manufacturers to improve their energy efficiency?
We are. We have some significant energy efficiency programs for businesses in our service territory. And when I talked about the energy efficiency trading platform that we're creating, it's in design phase, so we got a lot of work to do on it. But we want to test smart contracts and some of the distributed ledger kind of concepts in the business. But the main focus of that will be businesses, because they're going to have enough kilowatt hour savings to make trading impactful, and it will also be in their interest that the goal here is to you got to create some currency around the kilowatt hour reduction in order to trade them, and the currency is we know half of the Fortune 500, more than half of the Fortune 500 companies have sustainability goals, and that's what customers expect, and that's what investors expect. I don't know if anybody read the BlackRock letter to their investment companies this year, but it was very much focused on human benefits and the environment, and then that's what BlackRock's expecting from the companies that they invest in. So the idea is to create some currency, but the focus will be on small and medium-sized businesses to sort of create that trading platform. So yeah, we're very involved in that.
Next question, and they're coming in, so we're going to give you a few more.
Good.
What is ComEd's roadmap to accommodate the ever-increasing transportation electrification?
Yeah, we are working on that. I would say there are probably places and utilities around the country that are a little bit ahead of us on that. I think California has a lot going on with charging stations. The utilities in general have been very focused on building charging stations, and the reason for that is the way we make money is by building infrastructure. We put iron in the ground, we go to the regulator, we pass it through a rate case, and we earn a return on it. So anytime you can put iron in the ground and you're a utility, it's a good thing. I frankly don't think that charging infrastructure is where the game is at on electric transportation. I think there's so many more interesting questions in the network aspects of it, both in terms of how does a person from California who's driving across the country and gets into your service territory get charged, and it's almost like an ATM network. How does that work? So I think that's a question that we have to solve that's very interesting and will require both competitive companies and the utility. And then I think the other really interesting question around electric transportation is when you're managing a distribution grid and you've got generation inside the distribution grid and it's very volatile and you've got people buying and selling and you're really managing a much more dynamic grid. The questions of how the contracts that you create with vehicle owners, how you draw on their energy or ask them to back off and pay them for demand management, all those questions of how you manage the system in that kind of scenario, a lot of which will be automated, are interesting questions in my mind. We're working with environmental groups in Illinois right now to try to look at electric transportation and think about how we can jumpstart that for the future, but I think we're probably a couple steps behind some other places on that.
So a good question from a university. What kind of skills are you looking for in your future employees?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we definitely need technical skills. Obviously, there's a lot of technology here. But we need people who can combine that with, sort of creative thinking skills. I mean, you almost want a little bit of liberal arts and a little bit of technology, blended in. I need people who can be agile and nimble, who can think about, playing a role on one team one day, and then, a couple months later shifting to another team and playing a different kind of role. And so people who know how to be collaborators and followers and leaders when needed, people who can be technical but also can be, creative and see the, human and community side of things as well, and the impacts of their technology. So it's really interdisciplinary, and again, I give Laurie and Carnegie Mellon a lot of credit for looking at this question cross-functionally, because that's the way we're trying to solve it. I actually had a conversation with Laurie earlier today about inside the company. Utilities are really, really hierarchical, and they're very structured very linearly. So you have your engineering lane, and you have your economists, and you have your lawyers, and you have your finance people, and they haven't traditionally talked much to each other. And so I'm throwing them all into the same room and telling them that they got to figure this out together, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting. But I need people who can talk across different functions and can kind of work in those kind of teams. Because the team I have together today, in a couple months, it'll be a different team. Some of them will be the same, but I'll throw some new people in there. So this ability to kind of shape shift and morph and evolve and play different roles is a big piece of what the future will require, I think, in our companies. We always need good engineers.
With the law limiting your business in some ways, how can startups engage with you? Are you able to invest in innovative startups?
Yeah, so I'll come at that question a couple different ways. One is, so we're part of a larger holding company, Exelon. Exelon has 5 utilities and a very large generation company. And so there's Exelon, actually, which has more of a competitive side as well as a regulated side, actually does invest in startup companies. So that comes through the Exelon realm, not so much the regulated utility realm. But here's how I think we think about engaging with startups and third-party companies. I talked about the platform model and the 4 layers that we've kind of identified that we're trying to work through. And when I talked about it, I talked about the first layer being really the infrastructure layer. That's kind of where we live today, and that's probably where I think the utility lives for a long time in the future. Planning and operating similarly, I think you probably want your utility to do that. When you get to layer 3 and you start thinking about energy transactions, and you get to layer 4 and you start thinking about services transactions, then I think you start to bring in third parties, because that's not, especially in a restructured state like Illinois, we run wires and poles, we don't run generation. We're not going to be involved in most of those transactions. We're going to facilitate them as a platform, kind of an eBay. We connect buyers and sellers, but we're not the buyer or the seller for the most part. And so I think that's how we think about bringing in the innovation that small companies, that startups, that new, fresh views of the industry can bring, as well as sort of maintaining the stability and doing what we do best. We have a marketplace right now It's basically an internet marketplace, but it's a little bit of an experiment that we're doing. We've had it up maybe a year and a half now. We've got smart thermostats that we sell on it. Again, it's not, we don't make smart thermostats, but Nest does and others do, Ecobee. And so we sell those smart thermostats across the marketplace. We're evolving the marketplace. We expect to see solar start to emerge in numbers, probably fourth quarter this year. And we're putting together a solar services platform. So if you're thinking about purchasing solar, you can come onto our platform. We'll pull down your usage. We'll take a Google shot of your home. We'll give you the economics of running solar off of your home. If that's not feasible, we can give you the economics of a share in a community solar program and where you might find that. Similarly, once you make the investment in solar, we'll have a tracker that allows you to track the economics, the payback, et cetera. So this is, sort of the services platform, again, some of which I think we can provide because we can do that efficiently, and some of which we'll have third parties brought in. And that's how I think we'll connect at the utility level.
The next question. How can universities help utilities the most to advance innovation beyond research?
Well, we have, I think, partnerships and partnering in, very specific projects. Obviously, the research that comes out of universities are tremendously helpful, and we, rely on that quite a bit and watch that. I think that, coming in and being part of specific, projects and really helping to make this work on the ground is, I think, sort of a next phase of engagement where I think there's lots of opportunity.
2 more questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
As long as you want to stay.
So what made you want to work in the utility industry?
Oh, we're getting personal. So I was an antitrust lawyer for about 10 years, and I got a call from a headhunter about the time that the restructuring law was passed in Illinois, late 90s. And what the restructuring law in Illinois did was, it was one of the first states to restructure, is they pulled generation away from the transmission and distribution network and set them up ultimately separate subsidiaries. And the company was looking for lawyers who understood markets, because they didn't have anybody, their monopoly for 100 years. They didn't have anybody really internally who understood markets and the legal entanglements of regulation. And when I got the headhunter call, I liked practicing antitrust law. I thought it was great. But I thought, this is really the last sort of fully economically regulated industry. Obviously, regulation hits most industries in many different ways, but fully economically regulated industry. This was the last one to go through restructuring. Airlines had gone, telecommunications, trucking, and you're sitting here with the electric industry and you're left with it. And I thought, it's just a great opportunity, for an intellectual challenge. And I never, ever thought I'd end up here. I just thought I was going to have a great time practicing law in this, realm of untangling, a 100-year network of regulation in a way that would allow markets to work and provide benefits, to consumers at the end of the day. So that's why I jumped.
All right, so the last question. What is your strategy for handling the data coming from new technologies? And what role do you see machine learning techniques playing for tackling grid problems?
Yeah, I think, data is a huge question that is really, sort of underlies everything here. There's a lot of work to be done there. So on the one hand, we need data. We need to figure out how we use data for operational purposes. There is so much opportunity to be more efficient operationally. I mean, we literally still do, our maintenance, time-based maintenance. Every couple weeks, we send somebody to the substation to, check the gases on the transformer and, to be able to do condition-based maintenance. The amount of cost that will pull out of our system is tremendous. So that's, one lane of using data in our operations. I think, automation intelligence and robotics also has, tremendous benefits. I saw recently robotics that's used on, we use drones to fly our transmission lines, but I saw a robot that essentially, runs along transmission lines and detects, faults. And when you think about being able to do your inspections and maintenance by virtue of technology, not only are you going to run a better and more reliable system, but you're going to take cost out. So there's a big piece of data in running our system that we have not figured out. We have just scratched the surface, and we need an awful lot of help because it's just not our bailiwick. The second area is the data that you need to animate markets. And there's always a push and pull there. There are third parties who tend to want more of the information than we want to give. We're a little concerned because obviously security interests in this industry are significant. And so we're very careful about what kind of data gets out there about, system configuration and that sort of thing. So there's a big push-pull on that, and I think that will continue for some time. And, we'll find the right balance. But we are cognizant of the fact that we're going to have to share more, and that it's important to have it out there in order to animate markets, create benefits for consumers. And then I'd say the third bucket is really data privacy and maintaining that, and that is very parallel to what we see in other commercial entities, and trying to make sure that we've got the right practices as well as technology to protect that. But this is a huge area. It's an area where, again, it's not particularly our strong suit, and I think there's a lot of room for help on that. Okay? Thank you.
I just want to take a moment to thank Anne for all her wonderful, insightful comments, her breadth of knowledge, and her ability to translate it in a way to get us all thinking deeply was very notable and inspiring to me. So thank you very much, Anne.